So India has totally rewritten the rulebook for work, and it's going to affect millions of employees and companies. We're talking everything from your right to organize all the way to what counts as fair pay. It's all changing. So let's break down what this massive overhaul actually means for you.
Okay, imagine this for a second. You find out that the person working right next to you, with the same experience, doing the exact same job, is making way more money. What can you even do in that situation? It's a really frustrating question, and honestly, it's one that a lot of us have probably thought about.
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to do something a little different. We're actually going to tackle questions from a real-life labor law exam paper. And trust me, these aren't just some dusty old textbook questions. These are real-world dilemmas that get right to the heart of India's new Industrial Relations Code of 2020. Now, this new code is a massive deal. It takes dozens of older, kind of confusing labor laws and boils them down into a much simpler framework. It pretty much touches everything, from how you're hired to the rules for going on strike, and yeah, even the process for how you can be let go. All right, first up, let's talk about power in numbers. The new code has a lot to say about your right to team up with your coworkers and form a union.
So let's look at this exact problem from the exam paper. You've got workers dealing with low pay and unsafe conditions, a classic reason to organize. But the second they even think about it, management comes down hard, threatening their jobs. This is a super high-stakes situation that, believe me, plays out all the time.
So what are their options here? Are they just stuck? What does the law actually say about protecting people who are just trying to stand up for their rights?
Well, the new code is basically a shield for these workers. It's not vague, it explicitly gives them the right to form unions. And threatening to fire someone for doing that, that's now officially defined as an unfair labor practice, which makes it totally illegal. The law also says management can't meddle with, control, or try to secretly fund a union to control it.
Okay, but what happens when talking just doesn't work? When workers feel like their only option left is to go on strike? Well, as you can imagine, there are some very strict rules for that too.
Here we go, another scenario straight from our source. Workers at a car factory are fed up with their pay, so they just walk out. The key thing here is they did it without giving any warning. They just stopped working. And that move right there brings up a huge question about whether what they did was even legal. And this is where you can really see the dividing line. For a strike to be legal, workers have to give at least 14 days' notice. That's a big one. They also can't just strike whenever they want, especially not while official negotiations or conciliation proceedings, a formal mediation process, are happening. If they ignore those rules, like the car factory workers, that strike is immediately considered illegal. And believe me, the consequences are serious. If a strike is illegal, workers can lose their pay for that whole time and even face disciplinary action. The employer can actually sue for compensation because of lost production, and the union itself, its official registration, could be on the line. So the big takeaway here is, while the right to strike is protected, it comes with some very real responsibilities.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about something that hits close to home for pretty much everyone. Job security, fair treatment, and of course, equal pay. So, picture this situation. An employee gets fired for constantly being late. I mean, on the surface, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? But the employee fires back, saying the company didn't follow its own rule book. And this is where a really important kind of legal-sounding term comes into play.
And that term is standing orders. The easiest way to think about this is as the official, legally binding rulebook for a company. It's not just some internal memo. It has to be certified by the government. It spells out everything from what counts as misconduct to the exact step-by-step process for firing someone. If a company breaks its own standing orders, that dismissal can be challenged in court.
Now, it's really important we don't mix this up with being laid off, which the law calls retrenchment. See, a dismissal is a punishment for doing something wrong. Retrenchment, on the other hand, usually happens for business reasons, like the company is downsizing. That's a whole different process with its own set of rules and required compensation.
And just like that, we're right back where we started, with Sarah and Tom. Same job, same skills, but a completely different paycheck. And when Sarah asks why, she gets that frustrating, vague answer. Oh, it's just company policy.
So here's the million-dollar question. Under these new labor codes, is company policy a good enough excuse? Does this situation legally count as wage discrimination?
And the answer under the new law is a huge, resounding no. The new code on wages is crystal clear on this. You cannot discriminate based on gender when paying people for the same or similar work. And company policy? That is absolutely not a legal defense. Sarah has every right to file a claim, and the employer would be legally forced to fix that pay gap.
So we've walked through all these different scenarios. What's the big picture here? What does this new rule book really mean for people on the ground, for both employees and their employers?
So what's the bottom line? Well, for employees, these new codes offer much clearer, stronger protections for organizing and fighting back against unfairness. For employers, things are actually a bit simpler to navigate, but the penalties for breaking the rules are really, really strict. The main goal here is to strike a new balance, to protect workers' rights while also making sure businesses can run smoothly.
But all of this leaves us with one final, really big question for the future. These rules were written for a world of factories and offices, but with automation and the gig economy totally changing what work even looks like, how will these laws have to change and adapt to make sure the next generation of workers is protected too?